Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy shit we don't need.
Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of Project Uproar. This is Ryan again, and today we have a familiar face on the podcast. We have Giacomo. Giacomo was on the podcast, one of our earlier episodes. He spoke about inspirational movies that related to self-development. So we have him on again today to talk again about films, to talk about shows, and especially during this time, during social isolation where we have to try to find something to do. I think being able to explore different movies is a great way to spend your time. So Giacomo, thanks for taking the time to speak with us again.
Oh, it's great to be back. I love seeing how the pod's been growing, and it's really exciting to come back. Really, you guys are doing a great job.
For sure. Thanks a lot. So the first question, I'm just going to ask you a very general question. Have you seen any good movies lately?
I have. Now we have lots of time.
Go ahead. What are some movies that you've seen?
I watched, I was a little late watching it, but I watched Ford versus Ferrari. It came out last year. It was just one of those movies that I just missed. And I really enjoyed it. It felt really like old-fashioned 1960s movie. It had stars being stars with Christian Bale and Matt Damon. It just seemed like a movie that isn't really made anymore today. Just like a big like American blockbuster with two big stars, and it was just it felt very slow and old-fashioned. I really, really enjoyed it. I also watched Annihilation. That's from the director who made Ex Machina. It's a show on FX called Devs. Really great movie. It's like a really cool science fiction film with 5 women who are leads in it, and it bombed in theaters, which I found interesting because everyone's looking for that progressive female-led original story, and nobody went to see it in theaters. So it found like a home on Netflix, and I gave it a watch, and I just don't know why people missed it, or it didn't land with audiences.
Speaking of another movie that I think initially bombed in the theaters or wasn't here for that long, you saw Parasite, right?
I did.
Yes. See, I haven't seen it. How did you like it?
Yeah.
It was worth it.
I don't want to add to the hype of it, but it's as good as people say. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
I saw it. I was lucky enough to see it in theaters. I had a friend. I didn't really know it was coming out, and I had a friend who said he had tickets for a random Tuesday at 2:00 show, and we went. There was 2 other people in the theater, and it was great. It was like kind of like halfway through the movie, you kind of felt like you were watching something special, and you knew you were in like. I'm sure you've had that when you've read a great book and you're only a couple of chapters deep, and you know it's going to be
for sure
exceptional, right? I kind of felt like that, and I think I watching more of Bong Joon-ho's films, and I think one will come up later on in this pod that I think is worth talking about, especially with the times that we're in the COVID crisis. And I'm glad you asked that because we'll be talking about Bong Joon-ho for a bit.
Yes, and you were able to get through the subtitles pretty well.
Yeah, I think he had the best. I forget which award show it was. It might have been the Globes, and he did his speech, and he had a translator through his whole press circuit. But he said if people could avoid the 1.5-inch barrier on the bottom of the screen, they'd be open up to thousands of more incredible movies.
Yeah,
which was probably the best line of this whole press junket, was because he's very true, right? People see that and they get scared of it.
Yeah.
But then you had like Inglourious Basterds, which is a huge movie. Tarantino, I think a third of it is in English. The rest is all subtitles. So there's an audience for it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if Igor was here, he'd agree, because what he does is obviously commentate on anime, and a lot of animes have to do with you're having to get past the barrier of subtitles. So for sure, could definitely still connect with those films.
I understand why it can be distracting because you're looking on the bottom reading and you're trying to look up when they're saying something. It is a different experience. Sometimes you want to read the whole sentence and then look up.
Yeah.
It's and then you got to worry about the inflections of people's voices because different languages have different inflections as well, right? So it is a different experience, but I don't know, it's worth to get over the hump.
Yeah, I'll have to catch it. So like you kind of mentioned, I'm really into books, and I'm trying my best, especially during this time, to get into movies. I know you and I started a movie club where we're watching 2 movies a month and getting together and talking about it. So in your opinion, what is unique about movies, as thinking of it as a kind of art form?
I think it's a couple things. The one thing is, like I said, I think I've said before, we're just kind of scratching the surface on the possibilities of it. Again, it's only like 100-year-old medium for storytelling. I don't know, maybe podcasts are the only thing that's mainstream right now. That's a more recent form of storytelling, but it's nobody really knows exactly how to do it yet. We're still trying to discover it and figure it out, and that's what's exciting, right? Every year there's a new push of technology, new form of storytelling. So it's kind of exciting because I'll make 100 years from now, we might look back and think that we were in the Stone Age when it comes to telling these stories. Uh, it's only 100 years old. It's so new and it's still fresh, right? And I think there's an experience. I always I always go back to Tolkien, of course, but when you read in Lord of the Rings about when the lighting of the beacons happen across for Gondor and Rohan to unite, when you read it on the page, it's one thing. That when you see it in a movie with the music swelling and no dialogue at all, they just show visual storytelling with music in the background. It's something that a book can't do. Kind of just elevates you emotionally, I find.
For sure, yeah. What do you find it just I guess you kind of touched on it. What do you find it unique as a form of storytelling? Maybe that's different than a book.
See, what I would say, it's not really different because I guess books do this too, but sometimes how they play with the timelines and they play with the order of how the story happens. But books have been doing that forever as well. I think the one thing is that it's obviously a lot quicker to digest the movie and go through it faster than a book. So I
Mhm.
think a scene has to do more than one thing, right? Because you're
Yeah.
taking I don't know how, it depends on the size of the book, obviously, but a book takes a lot of time to read, and you try to get that story in 90 minutes or 120 minutes, right?
Mhm.
So I think everything in a movie or a good movie tells a little bit of the story without actually telling or taking up runtime. If that
Mhm.
kind of makes sense.
No, yeah, for sure. And I'm curious, bit of an off question from that. What how should I phrase this? What do you consider a good adaptation, movie adaptation from a book? And in your opinion, what makes a good adaptation in general?
See, I get in, not the arguments, but I get into this talk a lot with my friends too, is when they see a movie and it wasn't exactly like the book and that
Yeah.
upsets them. See, I'm kind of in the different camp. Like, I don't want it to be just like the book, because
Mhm.
if you want to experience that story, just read the book.
Yeah.
The whole point of adaptation is to do something with it and
Yeah.
change it and make it for a movie. So
Mhm.
the whole argument of, it was so different than the book. Well, it doesn't make it a bad movie
Yeah.
if something's different than the book.
Mhm.
Um, Again, we just talked about it, but to me, like, the Lord of the Rings is the best example, because as much as I love the books, there are parts you can definitely cut out and
Mhm.
parts that aren't as important. And the way that the timeline is in the book, it's unfilmable. And Tolkien's famous for saying it's an unfilmable book. That's why he sold the rights for, I think, $10,000.
Yeah.
Right. So what the filmmakers did obviously was take that story, rearrange it so you can tell it linearly,
Mhm.
and kind of not cut the fat, but again, take out parts that aren't necessary in a movie.
Mhm.
Right. If that kind of makes sense.
No, yeah, for sure. So you think Lord of the Rings is one good example. Do you have another
Well,
example that does something like takes on creative license or does a good job at trimming out that fat?
interesting enough, kind of going the opposite. I think Fight Club is a very literal adaptation.
Mhm.
I don't. Have you read Fight Club?
Yeah.
And you've seen the movie, obviously, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I find it's a very literal adaptation,
Mhm.
even as so far as like the way that he narrates himself. It's almost like the exact same as
Yeah.
how the book is written.
Yeah. Yeah. I find the same with if you've seen the original Great Gatsby movie.
I haven't seen the original.
No, I find it's similar in terms of what it covers. Like there's not much that's necessarily left out, whereas the new one it leaves out a couple kind of seminal iconic lines from the novel. They end up just leaving it out. So
Okay.
yeah, I see there's a fidelity there.
Yeah, No
Um,
Country for Old Men's a good one too. That's a very good adaptation as well. It's very, very literal. It's very much
oh,
like the book. They take out a little bit of like the psychotic of the. Just sometimes you don't need to show every act of violence that the book has in it, and
mhm,
that's a very good adaptation as well. It's very, very literal.
yeah.
But then again, what a good adaptation doesn't always mean it's a literal translation of the book.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think there was, I took a course actually in university. It was on adaptation, and the whole course was focused on Frankenstein.
Okay.
So we read the original text, and then we just watched a bunch of different adaptations, even looked at Pinocchio as an adaptation of Frankenstein, which was kind of cool. And I
Hmm.
think we read a theorist named Robert Stam, I think his name was, and he talked all about that, the importance of how we don't have to be faithful to the text, and how we shouldn't kind of evaluate movies based on how close they are to a text, or if they've left something out. Like, we need to look at it as a separate form of art that is separate from that original text. So for sure, it's
Yeah, I
really
think
interesting.
like obviously you can have that discrepancy if a book takes something that was so great in the book and then belittles it, or it takes the essence. Like to me, it should have the same kind of quality and essence of the book. No matter how you tell the story, it could be different, right? I wish I could speak more about this, but obviously the big thing now is Marvel movies, right? And
Yeah.
those are adaptations of comic books,
Yeah. Hmm.
right? And I know they take a lot of liberties because the comic books are crazy and you can draw whatever you want.
Yeah.
I wish I could speak more on that, but I think that is like currently the biggest form of adaptations that happen all the time. It seems like fans are pretty pleased
Yeah.
because obviously they make billions of dollars.
Yeah. Before I get to the next question, really quick, I'm curious, what is your favorite Spider-Man movie from the
Oh,
adaptation of the comic?
oh no, oh no. It's hard because when the first two came out, you're just at that age where I think I was 11,
Yeah.
and I remember like waiting in line for the theater to see it.
Hmm.
So it'll always be really close to my heart. Even though I really like what they're doing with the new stuff, I really like Homecoming a lot
Yeah.
and Far From Home.
Hmm.
I just think having again, I'm not a big comic book guy except for
Yeah.
Spider-Man, and I just like him being a teenager, and I just like the feeling of those movies, how they kind of seem like '80s John Hughes Breakfast Club movies.
Yeah.
So I think if Desert Island, I would pick the old Tobey Maguire, probably Spider-Man 2, but I really like.
Yeah. For sure. I'm curious to know so again, I would consider a newbie in the film field. I'm trying to get into it. What films do you consider essential to watch for someone trying to become familiar with the film canon or the movie canon? I know we kind of
Yeah,
talked about this before, but if you want to either reemphasize certain films or
yeah.
movies, or you want to bring up something new that has changed your mind.
Well, I like to kind of flip it and have a conversation with you about it too, because like to me, I think of what's a rewatchable movie and why people like something. So obviously, I guess you would call it a popular movie, but for yourself, when you're telling somebody about a book to read that is canon that they should absolutely read, to me, I feel like you would just say the classics, right? Like you would say Great Gatsby and Tolstoy or whatever. Like,
Hmm.
what would your ideology be about saying what's something you should read or you have to read it?
I would say probably something that people deem as timeless, and also something that kind of changes you as a person in some way, makes you rethink something, makes you
Mm,
rethink yourself. So that's how I kind of maybe
yeah,
define that, something that is kind of transforms you even in a small way.
I like what you say timeless because that kind of fits what I'm thinking. I was thinking about what I find is a rewatchable movie, something you want to watch over and over again. And I guess that is timeless as well. Something you can always look at and watch and get something out of it. And it's just like an enjoyable experience.
Hmm.
So I think of the Breakfast Club, The Godfather, Usual Suspects, Pulp Fiction. I would even say like Spinal Tap, stuff like that. That's timeless. And I like how you said about timeless because I think that's even you have rewatchable movies that you would pop in, right?
Hmm.
And opposite, you have movies that you'd like, but you don't really want to watch again.
Yeah.
So would you recommend that to somebody who's trying to get into it? Probably not,
Yeah.
because what's exciting about it is putting a movie in and then maybe a couple weeks later revisiting it
Hmm.
with a different headspace, right? And different
Yeah.
different mindset.
Yeah. You know what movie I actually saw a couple days ago? I haven't seen since I was a kid, and I totally have a new appreciation. And it kind of, I don't want to say it transformed me, but it really got me thinking,
Mhm.
was Toy Story. Like,
Oh,
great movie. And really had me thinking about, oh, there you go. What is that Toy Story 4? I have to still see that one.
Really enjoyed it.
Yes. Yeah, no, really had me. Well, maybe why do you enjoy Toy Story?
I think they're adult movies with adult stories, but drawn like children's movies.
Yeah,
I think it's the best way to describe it. And Pixar does this with a lot of their movies. I think that's what makes them so enjoyable. But to
yeah,
me, they're the pinnacle. They're not children's stories,
yeah,
right? Like especially you know they all touch on it, but the first one, like it's about insecurity and somebody taking your place and not knowing your spot in the world, and are you over the hill? Are you relevant anymore?
hmm,
Right? Like Toy Story, especially, it's all about insecurity,
yeah,
right? Woody's insecure about Buzz. Buzz doesn't know, we're on Toy Story pod, but
hmm.
I think
No,
that's what
yeah,
make I think that's what makes those movies connect with people so much.
yeah. For sure. I totally, especially I saw Toy Story 2. I still have to see 3 and 4, but yeah, when Woody goes through that kind of existential crisis, whether he should go back to Andy and really he only has a certain time with Andy and he'll be
Mm.
forgotten whether to stay where he is. It's definitely, it touches on things that we go through as well.
And yeah, and they touch on in the third movie too. And the third, again, the first two, he brings up always, what if we're not needed a one day,
Hmm.
right? And that's what the third one's about, when they're actually not needed anymore, and where's their place. And it's not really a child story. They're just toys,
Hmm.
right? I think that, and they don't act like children either.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I think that's another thing too, is that, like, when most kids movies, they're acting silly, and sure there's comical characters, but they don't act like children even though they're toys. They're
Yeah,
adults.
yeah. No, I totally agree. Even like reading something, going back to books like The Little Prince, right? It's very easily digestible in terms of the language, but there's themes there that and topics there that definitely touch on things that adults are going through as well. I guess them to
Hmm.
reflect. I'm curious about what you talked about, kind of maybe canonical suggestions. What are basically the kinds of movies that you enjoy watching and why? So it could be genre, it could be a particular trope.
Yeah, I'm not a big horror fan just because I don't like being scared. I don't like that feeling.
Hmm.
Maybe it's just me being a man child. But other than that, I'm kind of in for anything. I really like a writer director, meaning somebody who wrote something and then directed it.
Yeah.
Kind of having one person's vision. And that's the thing with a lot of these Marvel movies, where it's such a committee feel. There's six writers, there's tons of people who it's pretty much what a focus group's going to like, and they base the movie based on ticket sales, and obviously every movie wants to make money, but I just love the writer director who writes something, films it, and it's
Yeah.
just one person's vision. I'll always take that over anything else.
Hmm.
Again, you get Paul Thomas Anderson movies and Wes Anderson and Quentin Tarantino, guys like that, who just I like singular visions.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's interesting. What are some good movie podcasts that you listen to that inspire you, that get you thinking about what movies to watch, which ones not to watch? What do you suggest?
There's two that I really like. One's called The Rewatchables, and it's with a bunch of guests on the Ringer Network, hosted by Sean Fennessy, who's just a brilliant writer and film critic. And what they do is, what makes it so digestible is they don't talk about movies that are unapproachable or crazy art house movies. They talk about rewatchable movies, Breakfast Club, uh, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Patch Adams, Good Will
Hmm.
Hunting, The Town, movies that people would like to see. And they just talk about it like it's you and I just shooting the shit, right?
Yeah.
And it makes it very approachable. And they have categories where they talk about who won the movie, who lost the movie, Apex Mountain, what's the best part, worst part, half-ass internet research, where they just look at different scenarios of what could have happened. I really like that one because it's kind of fun seeing why people love something so much, and the fact that they only talk about movies that are rewatchable or timeless.
Hmm.
Chances are you've seen it or you've heard of it, so just
Yeah.
getting someone else's opinion on it, it's a really good listen.
Yeah.
The other one I like is called The Big Picture, and that one's a little bit more of a conversation with filmmakers and about the state of the film industry. And they try to be very topical, so they'll try to interview directors who have a movie coming out that week. Uh, that one's a little bit less goofy as the rewatchables, and
Yeah.
more about the state of movies and just
Hmm.
talking with filmmakers. And then when the Oscars come, they do their Oscar shows and
Yeah.
predictions. That one's really good as well.
Yeah. So it sounds like the first one's more maybe commentary. Second one's more just looking at more of the people in the movie industry.
Yeah, and like sometimes rewatchables if they're doing a movie that they just absolutely love.
Hmm.
They'll take 5 minutes and just like do quotes with trying
Yeah.
to act and pretend like they're the characters. It's just more of like you and I sitting around a table having a beer talking about movies
Yeah.
and ones that are approachable.
Hmm.
So that's a good one. That's a good one even just to if you want to know what movies to watch. Just go on that pod. I think they have 150 of them now and just
Yeah.
see what they're talking about.
Yeah. And that's with Bill Simmons, who
He
is a
he co-
sports. Go
yeah,
ahead.
he comes on and off.
Yeah.
He's on all of them, but he does make an appearance on some and
Yeah.
yeah, he's always a great addition.
Yeah. And I'm curious, he has a connection with sports. And now that sports are no longer, we can't watch any sports right now. What are some good sports films that you recommend during this time, either to motivate you to stay interested in sports or to kind of get that adrenaline rush?
Well, I think like the best is Slapshot, right?
Yeah.
I like
Slapshot one?
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think you could beat that, right?
Yeah.
Can we say dodgeball?
Yeah. It's a sport movie. Yeah.
There's commentators, right?
Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
If you dodge a wrench, that movie like I haven't watched it in a while, but it's still one of the funniest things I've seen.
Hmm.
Obviously, Miracle's really good.
Hmm.
Remember the Titans, but the best one, like if I would say what is the best one, probably Moneyball.
Moneyball. Yeah.
Right, and again with about like motivation, that's about one guy who thinks he has an idea and tries to prove himself,
Yeah.
and it's a true story, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, they have some liberties with it, but Billy Bean's a really interesting character, and it's a great performance by Pitt. And again, that's probably the if I pick my favorite sports movie.
Yeah.
I don't even like baseball,
Oh, really?
and I don't think you need to really. I mean, I'll watch it, watch
Yeah.
playoffs, but I don't really enjoy the sport.
Yeah.
But which is why I think that movie's so resonant and great
Yeah.
because it's not really about the baseball. It's more
Yeah.
about having an idea that people don't agree with and you
Yeah.
trying to push that through.
Yeah. Because I mean, does the film focus much on like actual on the field play?
No.
It's more of the behind the scenes general manager kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, working for
Yeah.
somewhere that doesn't have a lot of money is trying to build a team
Yeah.
and just a whole different way of scouting players, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious about. We talked about some good movies. Myself, I have Netflix, Disney Plus. What are some movies someone should check out over the next while on Netflix or Disney Plus? It could be either movies or we could talk about shows.
Yeah. I would like to start with Okja. I don't know if you've heard of Okja, OKJA.
No, I
And
didn't.
it's the writer director who did Parasite and it's a Netflix movie. And I think it's pretty resonant because it's about the consumption of animals and talks about how basically the point is that I think it's fitting because not that I'm trying to sound too woke here, but COVID, SARS,
Hmm.
H1N1, all these started because of people eating animals,
Yeah.
right? And I just had a hamburger today. I'm not saying I'm better than that, but
Yeah.
Okta really speaks about the industry and it's approachable more, I think, than Parasite because it's half in subtitles and half in English. They have Hollywood stars in like Gyllenhaal and Tilda Swinton, so it's a little bit more approachable for somebody who wants to watch a Korean movie.
Hmm.
So I think Okja is a must watch, especially now because it really opened my eyes and really like stuck with me for a couple weeks after I saw it.
Yeah.
Um, I watched The Devil Next Door. It's a Netflix miniseries about some guy in Ohio who was accused of being Ivan the Terrible.
Okay.
Probably the worst like Nazi
Yeah.
besides the big guy, right? And it's about the court case trying to see if this guy was him. And I was just riveted. It's like 4 or 5 parts. Again, it's not like a happy-go-lucky movie, but I really enjoyed that. There's a bunch of good ones that I saw in there recently. Like Frances Ha is on there. It's a small indie movie about a girl who's in New York City who
Hmm.
doesn't really know where her life's going. She's
Yeah.
27, and it's just I don't know. There's something about it where it's only 90 minutes long, but it felt like 5 minutes.
Hmm.
It's just like such a pleasure to watch it, and it's by the guy who just did Marriage Story, so you can kind of see where
Hmm.
he started off.
Yeah.
Um, there's a bunch of good movies on there now because I've been watching a lot of TV shows on
Okay.
Netflix, and I feel like a lot of people are moving that way now because of all these Netflix originals being TV shows.
Yeah.
But I saw Phantom Threads on there. That's a good one to check out. Eternal Sunshine, Spotless Mind's on there. I watched that
Hmm.
again last year, and yeah, if you want to cry a little bit and be sappy, it's definitely a good one. And
Yeah.
it's a good performance by Jim Carrey doing like a dramatic role.
Hmm. For sure, yeah. I have a problem whenever I go on to either Disney Plus or Netflix. I tell myself I'm going to start something new, but then I end up watching The Simpsons or The Office, and I get into that trap.
Same
Or
here.
Arrested Development, which was
I
a show
know.
you introduced me to, and I'm
I think I got the
glad you
poster
did.
here.
Yes. But
And
yeah, go
I
ahead.
find, and there's so much like we took in psychology, but they're saying like the dichotomy and the problem of choice, right? When you have so many
Yeah,
choices, right? No matter what you pick, you're gonna think you picked the wrong one,
yeah,
and you're not even happy with it because there could
yeah,
have been something better.
yeah.
So sometimes I just scan it all and I get kind of lost.
Yeah. And that's something I miss from being a kid is like the idea of I remember my favorite show as a kid was Dragon Ball Z and it was on like every night at 8:30
Yeah, I
and I
watched
looked
that too.
forward to it. You could never like, just get access to it and watch it on your own time. You had to
Yeah,
wait. And right now we live in a culture where we don't have to wait anymore. We just could get whatever we want whenever we want it. And it's kind of, yeah, it gives us a bit of anxiety. We're like, now what do we watch? Right? Because we have
yeah,
everything we need and you have to think about priorities and what's important to watch. So yeah, I definitely feel that kind of anxiety sometimes when I'm met with all this choice and I can't decide. Sometimes I can't start anything because I'm just so overwhelmed with the choice.
yeah. I love that aspect of waiting. Like
Hmm.
I watched when I started watching Breaking Bad, I watched it on Netflix, and the last season I watched on TV.
Yeah,
It was more enjoyable waiting a week.
yeah,
Got just like excited, right?
yeah, yeah. And I guess really, I mean, besides like movies in theaters and I guess sports, and again, maybe shows on TV, but most people are going to Netflix. Like we don't really have that idea of having to wait for anything and seeing something spontaneous. It's always everything's there for us. So
Yeah. I wonder how much even just normal network TV that people watch. Like people watch HBO, right? They would watch an Amazon show, a Netflix show, but
yeah,
are people watching CTV shows or CBS? Like, are people watching Young Sheldon? I don't know.
no, I don't know.
You know,
Especially like the sitcoms too. I don't think they have that same like power they had maybe 10, 15 years ago when you had like even though it's I don't know how big it was, but I remember like Everybody Loves Raymond and Friends and
shows like that. Yeah.
stuff like that. Like people would come together and watch it together. And now like I don't know how much power they have now.
I think that show like Friends though, and I think the Office is like that as well. It has its own like subculture of
Yeah,
that's what people do when they're just sitting around bored. You want to put on The Office or they put on Friends and they
yeah,
don't even really think about it, right? It's just kind of always on.
yeah.
I know I did that with The Office with my buddies, like, sit over cracking a beer and they just put it on, right? They don't even think about it.
Hmm.
So I think it's hard because it's hard to be a new show like that now. People don't want to sit through commercials,
Yeah.
right? And especially if you're like somebody who has an idea, for a TV show, are you going to go to a network like that, or are you going to go to a Netflix or an HBO?
Hmm.
Are you just going to do no commercials? They're going to let you. There's no guidelines. You could swear, nudity, all the stuff you want. Like just more
Yeah.
freedom, right?
Yeah. I'm curious, why do you think I was actually flipping through the channel not too long ago and I saw Will and Grace came back?
Yeah,
I didn't
that
know
seems
that.
that seems to be the new trend, eh? Things
Yeah.
coming back.
Why do you think that's the case? Why are these kind of like 90s shows coming back?
Well, I think people are realizing that no matter what's new, people just want to watch Friends,
Yeah.
or they just want to watch the '70s show, or they just want to watch the shows that they liked when they were kids and be nostalgia
Yeah.
and have nostalgia, I should say, right? I can't think of many new network TV shows that are really stuck.
Hmm.
People really want to watch every week or talk about over the water cooler.
Yeah.
Like what are people watching? And again, Netflix. I think it's still having this issue that over 50% of the things that people watch on it are actually not Netflix originals.
Hmm.
They're Friends, The Office, right?
Yeah.
Um, they had Community, they lost that, so it'll be interesting. And I
Yeah.
know NBC is doing a streaming service,
Okay.
Peacock, and unless you look it up, you don't realize how many comedy shows were on NBC.
Yeah.
It's pretty much all of them.
Yeah. No,
Friends,
interesting.
The Office, Community.
Yeah.
I believe Seinfeld was NBC.
Yeah. Because Friends is leaving Netflix, right? And going to NBC.
Yeah, they're not going to renew. It's like I think Netflix paid $100 million to have Friends on last year.
Yeah.
And what Netflix is doing is pretty amazing. I think they put $13 billion to create content this year. And the
Wow.
idea is that they make so much that they can eventually stop making all this, so they just have a library
Yeah.
shows for people to watch.
Yeah.
Like they're not really even making money. Like they're in debt by billions and billions of dollars. They just need to have market share, right?
Yeah. No, I found that interesting. I think you said that last time. Like, what do you think the future of Netflix is?
I think it's like prestige movies.
Hmm.
I think that's what it is because it seems like, especially this past Oscars, right? They had a bunch of movies in there, and getting people not to go in the theater and come to watch the new movie on Netflix, I think is what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
It's something that they can do that like HBO can't, I think,
Hmm.
or don't. You don't really see HBO films, right? As
Yeah.
much, more like documentaries they do or stand-up specials.
Yeah.
But I think like they got a Scorsese movie last year. You don't.
Hmm.
So I think they're going to have more prestige movies.
Yeah. Interesting. I know in the immediate future, everyone's watching Netflix because of the situation we're
Hmm.
in. And I'm curious, what movies, like right now, a lot of people kind of need motivation because they're stuck at home, socially isolating themselves. What movies you recommend to help motivate people during this time?
The motivation's an interesting one because I feel like people also need like some sort of comfort. Like
Okay, or comfort.
like every time I watch, see, or I log into Netflix, you see Robin Williams with his big clown nose on. You just want to put a blanket on and watch Patch Adams,
Yeah.
or Mrs. Doubtfire. Um, I think also like I took it more of like people need some sort of laugh and escapism. So no, this and Hot Fuzz are on there, two really funny British comedies that I think are hilarious. And I think I don't know if motivation's what people are lacking right now. I think people are scared and panicked.
So more escapism.
I think so. I think so. And like, hey, I would say The Irishman because it's 75 hours long, right? It'll kill a
Yeah.
couple days at home.
Hmm.
It's an interesting time. It's an interesting time right now.
Yeah.
And I think if people can escape as much as they can, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Even like fantastical shows, right?
Hmm.
Like Lord of the Rings is on there. There's a whole bunch of like Annihilation's on there, some sci-fi,
Yeah.
and I think people need to laugh right now because people are just scared.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they necessarily need to be. I don't know what's the right mindset, but I don't think people need to be hoarding toilet paper.
Yeah, I agree with you there. What are some, I mean, maybe what are the most memorable lessons that you've learned from some of your favorite movies? You talked about Toy Story. What other movies have left you with lessons that you apply to your life or you think about, often or help you kind of go about your life?
Yeah, well, I mean, anything that Gandalf says, I'm gonna say,
Yeah.
right? Um, all we can do to decide is what the time that we're given, right?
Hmm.
It like pretty much can be raised based on that. Um, to me, what I like and what it resonates with me when I watch a movie is like the phenomenal human spirit and just like that will to push forward
Hmm.
and somebody who no matter what's thrown in his face believes in something so much and will keep trying to do it, kind of like Moneyball. Social
Yeah.
Network's the same thing, right? Just some guy has a vision and no matter what people throw at him, he's going to keep pursuing it. um, yeah, that's what I always leave it, almost like you're in awe of somebody when they believe in something so much and nobody agrees with them
Hmm.
and they still keep fighting, right? And they still keep crawling and working towards that goal.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think you like the adventure stuff, and you definitely see that with some of these adventure movies, even something like Lord of the Rings, where yeah, you have to follow through and push yourself, and definitely see that for
Yeah,
sure.
like again, like I got to do a Tolkien podcast, but I think Lord of the Rings has that special balance of while it's so about fantastical elements and battles and orcs and all that, it's really about the smallest person can make the biggest change.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing about it,
Hmm.
right? Even the most insignificant person can make a difference that changes the world, right?
Yeah. No,
And
for sure.
and that's yeah, that's the whole point about watching movies, right?
Hmm. Oh, yeah, I like that. I thought you were gonna say Karate Kid. We should all just watch Karate Kid. I know you're a big fan. Yeah.
I am a big fan.
Yeah.
I will never watch it again. But the fact that they have the best theme song
Yes.
right?
What about with the newer Karate Kid, the one in 2010?
I saw that once. I actually thought it was okay.
Yeah.
Have you seen
But
it?
I haven't. No, I don't know. I don't know if I could watch it. The old one was just so memorable for me.
Yeah, but it's like, is the old one good? Like, would you say, like,
I don't know.
would yeah, exactly? Would you say it's a good movie?
Uh, at the time, I thought it was.
No, yeah, but you just watched it now. Would you say it's good?
I wouldn't say I'd rewatch it anytime soon, but I don't know, it slightly motivated me.
Like like the first Star Wars movie. Like I really like it a lot. Obviously, I love it, but I don't know if it's good.
Yeah,
There's some pretty bad stuff in it, but
yeah,
I guess that's what kind of makes it good, right?
yeah.
There's a famous part, obviously, when the stormtrooper hits his head and his head knocks back, right? They just didn't bother cutting it out of the movie. They
Yeah,
just kept on doing it.
yeah. No, that's interesting.
How
I'm
are so
curious.
go
Go
on, sorry.
ahead. No,
I,
you go ahead.
I was just curious how you're holding up with all this isolation stuff going on.
Well, I'm trying my best to. I know on this podcast we talk a lot about Stoic philosophy, and this week we actually have someone who is runs a podcast on Stoicism. So I'm going to be asking him some questions as well about COVID-19 and how we should reframe it. But yeah, that's what I'm just looking at it. I'm looking at it as right now I'm like home. I'm not working because I'm a teacher. So I'm looking at it as privately an opportunity for me to grow personally. So being able to read, write, maybe reflect more than I have been afforded to before because life gets so busy. So
Yeah,
I'm trying my best to look at it as a unique opportunity that could hopefully lead to me being like just growing more as a person over these next couple months. But I think the fear that I don't know if it's the fear, but the difficult part about this whole thing for me, like everyone else, is like you don't know when it's going to end, right?
and nobody really does.
Yeah,
My hope is that people come out of it with a bigger appreciation about what they had,
yeah,
right? And then what a sense of community means
yeah,
and how important that is.
yeah,
Because like people live like this, obviously take away the virus part, right? But people live like this all the time in different countries. They
yeah,
go to a grocery store and they don't have options about whatever they want. They can't
hmm,
travel anywhere they want to go, right?
yeah,
People actually like live like this
hmm,
without the virus, right?
no, yeah, for
Um,
sure,
so it makes me appreciate what things kind of were, right?
yeah. And we're in a sense kind of, I mean, we don't have a prison atmosphere at home, but we're in a sense like imprisoned in our homes. We can't really go out. And I was actually I was rereading parts of Ryan Holiday's book, The Obstacle is the Way.
Hmm.
And in it, he talks about this boxer. I forget his name, but he was nicknamed the Hurricane. He was a boxer in the
Great.
60s.
It's a great movie too. It's
Yes.
by Spike Lee. That's a good movie and a great song by Bob Dylan.
Yeah. So, anyways, in the book, he talks about this boxer who was wrongfully
Yeah,
imprisoned, and he didn't look at his imprisonment as like something like, "Oh, the world, woe is me, the world is against me."
unbelievable, man.
He didn't complain. He's like, "I'm just going to go in there and read and develop, and I'm going to come out here a better person than I did going in there." And he did. And I'm looking at it. I mean, very different circumstances, but I'm like, if that guy could kind of make the best out of that situation, I'm pretty sure he was imprisoned. Do you remember for how long?
It was over 2 decades.
Yeah, it was a long time. So,
Who-
I mean, if he could do
Yeah,
that, I'm sure we can, I mean, go through this. I'm not making light, obviously, of like the illnesses and deaths that are
sure.
associated, but the idea if the worst thing, let's just knock on wood, say the worst thing that happened is we're isolated in our homes for however long we are, like 3 months, whatever, like I'm going to try my best to make the most of it. I'm going to devote time to this channel, this podcast,
Yeah.
so yeah, so I'm trying to reframe the situation. So
Well,
most of,
what's that meme? Is that our ancestors had to go to war to
yeah,
save and we just have to sit on the couch.
yes, yeah. And I think the other one is like this is gonna be our generational story is like when we're old, we're gonna be like, oh, I remember the time I had to sit at home for 3 months.
Yeah. Well, the hardest part I think will be like obviously the illness is the illness, but I think it's almost 50% of North America can't go with a $400 random expense.
Yeah.
and they live paycheck to paycheck, right? And just with the economy, it's like
Yeah.
a whole other thing that's on top of this, right?
Oh, I know. It's a whole different situation.
And I
going
wonder
through.
how, you know, folks want to talk about it a little bit because it's the thing going on, but I wonder what the end game is too. Like my opinion, I think what's going to happen is they're eventually going to loosen up and open up businesses because they realize that the economy kind of needs it. I was looking at some of the numbers on the CDC, and it's such a small percentage of people who get it actually get fatally ill,
Yeah.
right? And as bad as like we're Italian, obviously we wouldn't see what happens to Italy, but I think 99% of the deaths are 79 years old and up.
Yeah.
And Italy has the oldest population in Europe, 65 million
Yeah.
people. A lot of them are smokers.
Yeah.
Like, so I pray that we're not Italy, but I don't know how long the government can keep doing subsidies for people to not work. And,
Yeah. I know.
for a virus that 80% of people have no symptoms or almost no symptoms,
Hmm.
right? So it's kind of interesting. I don't
Yeah.
really know how it's going to play out. And I don't think they know either.
Yeah. And I feel bad whoever the next, well, in the US, the next president, or in Canada, the next, I guess the closest is premier, is going to be, because they're going to come in with, let's face it, like this is going to put our country and the United States, North America, into huge debt having to do this. But
Huge.
it has to, they have to. But, the next person who's coming in is going to be, having to get themselves out of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it was interesting actually. I was on Netflix the other day and I noticed they had a series on talking about like the reason why, or like backstories or something. And they had one episode, and actually I think Bill Gates was in it, on pandemics. Did you happen to catch that?
I see now because it shows like your top 10, right? Of like
Yeah,
top 10 things in Canada, and like one's contagion. I think two is pandemics.
yeah,
Some people are watching right now.
yeah. It's interesting because it's just the idea of, I think it was released in December, and they were just talking about then, like how kind of ill prepared that our world is if a worldwide pandemic
Yeah.
sweeps us. And sure enough, just shortly after, a few months after, we're in the middle of it. So it's
Yeah. Well,
interesting.
Michael Osterholm, he's in layman's terms, he is a disease detective.
Hmm.
He's like a brilliant, brilliant man. He was on Rogan's pod, and Joe was just very blunt. He's like, "How unprepared are we for this?" He's like, "Joe, it's very simple to explain it." He's like, "Say there's a fire,
Yeah.
and the fire station does not have a fire truck, and they see the fire, and they have to start building the truck now. That's great. We're building the truck, but it's burning and
Yeah.
burning and burning, right?" And it's
Yeah.
like and we could have had a vaccine for this back when SARS came around,
Hmm.
but the government just didn't put resources into something that was already done. So yeah, it's a crazy time.
So just last question for you. um what shows or movies are you looking forward to over this next little while? Like obviously there's not enough. Sorry, let's start that again. So I'm just curious, what shows or movies are you looking forward to over this next while? Obviously, everyone has a little bit more time on their hands because they have to stay at home. There's no new stuff necessarily being recorded, but are there certain movies that you're looking forward to watching that you've never seen before, or shows that you're continuing on with, or just ones that you want to start?
Um, there's two shows that are coming up that I'm excited for. The new season of Ozark comes out this week, the 27th, as well as the third season of Barry, which is probably my favorite new show right now. Uh, I'm catching up on Better Call Saul on Netflix. I'm a big Breaking Bad fan, so I'm on the fourth season now. I wish there were more movies coming out, but it seems like everything's kind of on pause.
Mm-hmm.
Netflix is coming out with a movie, or supposed to, directed by David Fincher, about the writing of Citizen Kane, which is like two or three of the most exciting things I can think of.
Yeah.
It's amazing how a lot of production on movies upcoming have paused because of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I built up my list a little bit on Netflix and things I want to watch and rewatch. There's some old Monty Python movies I want to see, and a movie called The Two Popes, which is last two pope battling at it. So I'm kind of
Yeah, I saw
interested in
that.
that. Yeah, it's supposed to be pretty good.
Yeah.
So my Netflix list is getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
Luckily we're in the situation though where we still have our jobs, right? So we still work.
Yeah, no, yeah, but it's just interesting how, now on a Friday or Saturday night, instead of going out to see someone, we're going to be stuck at
Yeah.
home. So my opinion on things, like I kind of said before, might as well make the most of it. And for myself, I've really wanted to devote more time to movies. So that's one of my goals. And I'm glad we had you on again to kind of provide some suggestions across the board and just motivate us to watch more films and appreciate
Yeah.
the art form.
Yeah. Anytime I want to come on.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Thanks a lot. And thank you for listening, everyone. And until next time, take care.